The council chamber looked exactly the same as before. The same circular design, the same elevated seats for 12 alien species, the same central floor where petitioners stood. But everything felt different this time. Jake Morrison walked onto that floor with Lisa Grant and Amy Torres flanking him. Behind them, projected on massive holographic displays, the Washington and 50 Phantom-equipped fighters hung in formation. Admiral Patrick Stone stood on the Washington's bridge, visible to everyone in the chamber. Chairman Vex Thor sat in his elevated position, but he wasn't laughing anymore. None of the council members were. They watched the humans with expressions that the translators identified as wariness mixed with respect. "Honored Council," Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "6 months ago, we came here as petitioners. We asked permission to join your galactic community. You denied us because our technology was primitive." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. On the displays behind him, footage from the battle played silently. Krell ships exploding, the Revenant phasing through shields, Phantom fighters making mockery of alien weapons. "We're not here to petition anymore," Jake continued. "We're here to inform you that humanity is now an active participant in galactic affairs. Whether you approve or not." The Krell representative, a different one than before, clicked his mandibles nervously. "You destroyed an invasion fleet. You committed an act of war against the Krell Empire. The Krell Empire invaded our territory, killed our people, and attempted to exterminate our species," Admiral Patrick Stone said from his display. His voice was calm but carried an edge sharp enough to cut. "We responded appropriately. If the Krell Empire wishes to discuss reparations for the damage they caused, we're willing to listen. Otherwise, they can consider this matter closed." The Krell representative started to respond, then seemed to think better of it and fell silent. The Valorian scientist who had mocked Lisa's fusion drive leaned forward. "Your Phantom drive and Cascade weapons. They violate known principles of physics. How is this possible?" Lisa stepped forward, activating her own display. Complex mathematical equations filled the air, flowing and shifting in patterns that made several aliens look uncomfortable. "They don't violate physics," Lisa explained. "They use physics you've never explored. Chaos mathematics, quantum uncertainty applied to macro-scale systems. Ordered civilizations naturally develop ordered technology. You've spent thousands of years optimizing efficiency, perfecting predictability, making everything more controlled." Greg Palmer appeared on one of the displays. "Joining from Earth, humans develop differently. Our history is full of chaos, adaptation to unpredictable circumstances, survival through creative problem-solving rather than raw power. Our technology reflects our nature, but chaos is inefficient," the Valorian scientist protested. "It wastes energy, produces unpredictable results, contradicts optimal design principles." "Exactly," Amy said with a slight smile. "Predictable systems are vulnerable to anyone who understands the pattern. You've optimized yourselves into a corner. Your shields follow algorithms we can disrupt. Your tactics follow patterns we can exploit. Your entire technological philosophy assumes enemies will play by the same rules you do. We don't play by those rules," Jake added, "and that makes us very dangerous to you." Chairman Vexithor's crystalline body flickered through several colors before settling on one that indicated deep thought. "You've made your point, Commander Morrison. The question is, what do you want? Revenge? Conquest? Territory?" "None of those," Jake replied. "We want recognition as equals. We want trade agreements on fair terms. We want mutual defense pacts with species who share our values. We want a seat at the table when galactic decisions are made. And we want assurances that no species will attempt what the Krell did." "You're demanding full council membership," the Saltian representative said, "after being rejected." "We're not demanding anything," Lisa corrected. "We're explaining reality. Humanity is now a spacefaring civilization with military capabilities that rival or exceed most council species. You can accept that and work with us, or you can oppose it and see what happens, but you can't ignore us anymore." The council members looked at each other, having silent conversations through channels humans couldn't hear. Finally, Vex Thor spoke again. "The council must deliberate on this matter. It is unprecedented. Species typically join after centuries of observation and gradual integration. You forced the issue through military action." "The Krell forced the issue," Patrick Stone interjected. "We just survived it. If you want to blame someone for disrupting your orderly galactic civilization, blame them for attacking us." Admiral Stone makes a valid point, the Saltian representative said. The Krell invasion violated multiple galactic laws. The humans defended themselves using previously unknown technology, which is not illegal. Unusual, certainly. Concerning, perhaps, but not forbidden. May I speak? A new voice entered the conversation. It was a representative from the Talcrin, a species that looked like floating jellyfish made of light. They rarely spoke in council sessions. We have observed humanity for many years. They are violent, chaotic, unpredictable, but they are also creative, adaptive, and resilient. Perhaps our council has become too stable, too orderly. Perhaps we need species who think differently. Are you seriously suggesting we reward them for disrupting galactic peace? The Valorian scientist asked. Peace? Amy laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. You let the Krell build an invasion fleet and attack us without intervention. You sat back and watched, planning to do nothing while they exterminated our entire species. That's not peace. That's cowardice dressed up as neutrality. Several council members bristled at the accusation, but none could effectively argue against it. Vexthor raised his hand for silence. Very well. The council will vote on immediate membership status for humanity. This is highly irregular, but clearly, regular procedures are insufficient. The vote was recorded through each species' communication system. It took less than a minute. When Vexthor announced the results, his voice carried a mixture of emotions the translator couldn't quite identify. By a vote of 9 in favor, 2 against, and 1 abstention, humanity is granted full council membership with all associated rights and responsibilities. Welcome to the Galactic Council, humans. I suspect things are about to become much more interesting. Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. They had done it. Humanity was no longer alone in the galaxy, no longer dismissed as primitives, but the real work was just beginning. Over the next 3 months, human representatives established embassies on 12 worlds. Trade agreements were signed for materials Earth needed and technologies Earth could provide. Defense pacts were negotiated with species who valued independent thinking. The Phantom Drive technology remained classified, but rumors spread quickly. 36 species approached Earth with research proposals and technology exchange offers. Some wanted to learn chaos mathematics. Others wanted to develop countermeasures. A few just wanted to ensure humans remained friendly. Ryan Beck found himself leading a team that developed export versions of human technology. Nothing as advanced as the Phantom Drive, but useful tools that could be sold or traded. Earth's economy boomed as alien currencies and materials flowed in. Admiral Patrick Stone oversaw the construction of a new fleet. Earth's shipyards worked around the clock, building vessels that combined human chaos theory with alien materials and power sources. The result was a fleet that made other species nervous. Good, Patrick said when a Valorian ambassador complained about human military expansion. Nervous is better than dismissive. Nervous means they're taking us seriously. Lisa Grant became the head of Earth's new science ministry, coordinating research across multiple fields. She worked with alien scientists who were initially skeptical, but gradually became fascinated by human approaches to problem solving. You think sideways, one Saltian researcher told her during a joint project. We see a problem and calculate the optimal solution. You see a problem and ask what would happen if we ignored the optimization and tried something crazy. And sometimes crazy works better than optimal. Lisa replied with a smile. Amy Torres trained a new generation of Phantom pilots. Young men and women from every nation on Earth competed for positions in the elite squadrons. The training was brutal, focused on developing intuition over calculation, creativity over procedure. The Phantom Drive doesn't want pilots who follow rules, Amy told her students. It wants pilots who understand when to break them. Any machine can follow an algorithm. We need humans who can feel what needs to happen. Jake Morrison found himself appointed as Earth's military liaison to the Council. It was a diplomatic position, but everyone understood the implicit message. Humanity was willing to cooperate, but they maintained the capability to defend themselves against any threat. 6 months after the battle at Mars, Jake stood on the observation deck of the new Earth station orbiting the moon. Lisa joined him carrying 2 cups of coffee, a human custom she was teaching to curious aliens. The Krell want to establish formal relations, she said, handing him a cup. Apparently getting their fleet destroyed taught them some humility. What are we? The sky above New York City turned dark at noon. It wasn't clouds that blocked the sun, but ships. Massive alien vessels hung in the atmosphere like metal mountains, casting shadows over the entire city. People stopped in the streets, looking up in horror and disbelief. Within hours, the same scene repeated across every major city on Earth. Tokyo, London, Mumbai, Moscow. All fell under the shadow of the alien fleet. General Marcus Blake stood in the Pentagon war room, watching screens that showed the alien ships hovering over dozens of cities. His jaw was tight, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Beside him, Admiral Kelly Watson studied the sensor readings with growing concern. The alien vessels were unlike anything humanity had ever built. Their energy signatures were off the charts, and their shields absorbed every scanning attempt. "They're not responding to any communication," Kelly said quietly. "We've tried every frequency, every language protocol we have." Marcus nodded grimly. "Then we prepare for the worst." But the worst came faster than anyone expected. The alien fleet's leader, a creature the intelligence community would later identify as Warlord Craven, transmitted a message that played on every screen, every phone, every device on Earth. His form was massive and reptilian, covered in dark armor that seemed to absorb light. His voice was cold and mechanical. "Humans of Earth, I am Warlord Craven of the Velcran Empire. Your world now belongs to us. You have one day to surrender your weapons and submit to Velcran rule. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your species." The transmission ended, leaving Earth's population in shock and terror. Governments scrambled to respond. The United Nations held an emergency session. Military forces around the world went to full alert. But deep down, everyone who saw those ships knew the truth. Humanity was outmatched. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of the USS Defiant, one of Earth's most advanced warships currently in orbit around the moon. His crew was silent, tense, waiting for orders. Jake was young for a captain, only 32, but he'd earned his position through skill and courage. Now he wondered if that would be enough. "Sir, we're receiving orders from Fleet Command," his communications officer said. "All ships are to form defensive positions around the planet." Jake nodded. "Take us in. Full speed." The Defiant joined with hundreds of other human vessels. Warships, defense platforms, armed satellites forming a protective ring around Earth. It looked impressive until the Velcran fleet moved. They descended through Earth's defensive line like sharks through a school of fish. Human weapons fired, missiles and energy beams lighting up the darkness of space. But the Velcran shields held. Every shot that should have destroyed a ship simply vanished against their shimmering barriers. Then the Velcran returned fire. Their weapons cut through human shields as if they didn't exist. Jake watched in horror as ships around him exploded, their crews lost in seconds. The Defiant shook as enemy fire grazed its hull, alarms blaring throughout the bridge. "Shields at 40%, his tactical officer shouted. "Evasive maneuvers," Jake ordered, but there was nowhere to hide. The Velcran had complete control of orbital space. On the ground, the invasion began. Velcran troop carriers descended on major cities, deploying thousands of soldiers in powered armor. They moved through streets with brutal efficiency, overwhelming local police and military units. In Chicago, former Marine Lisa Harper watched from a rooftop as alien soldiers marched through downtown, forcing civilians into designated areas. Lisa had left the military 3 years ago, thinking her fighting days were over. She was wrong. Around her, other veterans and civilians who refused to surrender gathered in the ruins of bombed buildings. They had hunting rifles, pistols, whatever weapons they could find. It wasn't much against an alien empire, but it was something. "We can't fight them head-on," Lisa said to the group of 20 people who looked to her for leadership. "We hit and run. We make them pay for every block they take." That night, Lisa's group ambushed a Velcran patrol. They used homemade explosives and sniper fire, taking down 3 alien soldiers before disappearing into the subway tunnels. It was a tiny victory in a losing war, but it gave them hope. In orbit, Jake Morrison made the hardest decision of his life. The Defiant was crippled, half his crew dead or injured. Staying in the fight meant certain death for everyone on board. "Fall back to the dark side of the moon," he ordered. "We regroup with whatever's left of the fleet." As they retreated, Jake looked back at Earth through the viewscreen. Velcran ships now surrounded his homeworld completely. Cities burned, millions were dead, and humanity's mightiest weapons had barely scratched the enemy. But something strange was happening that no one had noticed yet. Deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, ancient structures that had lain dormant for millions of years began to wake. Energy pulsed through crystalline corridors that predated human civilization. Similar activations occurred under the Antarctic ice, beneath the Himalayas, in the depths of the Pacific. The planet itself seemed to be responding to the threat. Dr. Nathan Cross noticed it first. He was a xenoarchaeologist working at a research station in Antarctica. When the seismic sensors went crazy, the readings made no sense. Massive energy signatures coming from deep beneath the ice, in patterns that looked almost artificial. "Amy, you need to see this," Nathan called to his colleague, Dr. Amy Rivers. Amy studied the data, her eyes widening. "That's not possible. There's nothing down there but ice and rock. We've surveyed this area for years." "Then the surveys were wrong," Nathan said. "Something is down there and it just turned on." Similar reports came in from research stations around the world. Oceanographers detected massive structures rising from the seafloor. Geologists recorded impossible energy readings from mountain ranges. The scientific community was baffled, but they had bigger problems to worry about. The Velcrin were winning. Within 3 days, every major government had fallen. Warlord Craven established his command center in what used to be the United Nations building in New York. Velcrin forces controlled all major cities. Humanity's military was shattered. The few remaining resistance groups, like Lisa Harper's fighters in Chicago, could only watch and wait for an opportunity that might never come. In his command ship, Craven looked down at Earth with satisfaction. Another world conquered. Another species broken. The Velcrin Empire grew stronger with each victory. He had no idea that beneath the planet he'd just claimed, ancient guardians were waking from their long sleep, and they did not approve of uninvited guests. Warlord Craven stood in his new throne room, looking out over the conquered city of New York. Velcrin soldiers patrolled the streets below, enforcing curfews and organizing human labor camps. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Although, few more days, Earth's resources would begin flowing to the Empire. The humans would be enslaved, their technology absorbed, their world stripped of anything useful. "My lord," one of his commanders approached, bowing low. "We're receiving reports of equipment malfunctions across all occupied zones. Communications are being disrupted by some kind of energy interference." Craven turned, his reptilian face showing annoyance. "Human sabotage?" "We don't believe so, Lord. The energy signatures are coming from deep underground and underwater. Our scientists cannot identify the source." Craven dismissed the concern with a wave of his clawed hand. "Then eliminate it. Send teams to investigate and destroy whatever is causing the interference. Nothing will stop our conquest." But the interference was growing stronger. Velcron communication networks began failing. Their sensors gave false readings. Equipment that worked perfectly during the invasion now malfunctioned at random. The Velcrin blamed human technology incompatibility, never suspecting the truth. In Antarctica, Nathan Cross and Amy Rivers had assembled a team to investigate the energy source beneath the ice. They used drilling equipment to bore through 2 miles of ice following the energy signature. What they found took their breath away. The drill broke through into a massive chamber that shouldn't exist. The walls glowed with soft blue light, illuminating a space the size of a cathedral. Strange symbols covered every surface, and in the center stood a pillar of crystal that pulsed with energy. The technology was clearly artificial, but it was ancient beyond measure. "This is impossible," Amy whispered, her scientific mind struggling to accept what her eyes saw. Carbon dating from the ice layers puts this at least 3 million years old, maybe older. Nathan approached the central pillar carefully. As he got closer, holographic displays suddenly activated, showing images and data in a language he'd never seen. But somehow the meaning became clear in his mind. The technology was communicating directly with his thoughts. "It's a record," Nathan said, his voice shaking with excitement and fear. "A history. Amy, humans didn't build this. We weren't even humans yet when this was created." The holographic display showed images of a tall, elegant species that called themselves the Architects. They had traveled the galaxy millions of years ago, visiting countless worlds. On Earth, they found primitive ancestors of humanity, barely more than clever animals. But the architects saw potential. They couldn't stay and guide humanity directly. That violated their laws about interfering with natural development. But they could leave protection. The hologram showed massive constructs being buried around the planet, guardians that would sleep until they were needed. The architects programmed them with a simple purpose. If humanity ever faced extinction from outside forces, wake up and protect them. Guardians, Amy said, watching the holographic images of towering crystalline beings. They left guardians to protect us, and the Velcron invasion triggered them, Nathan realized. That's what's causing the energy readings. They're waking up. Meanwhile, on the dark side of the moon, Jake Morrison and the survivors of Earth's fleet were having their own encounter with architect technology. The damaged ships had gathered near an ancient crater when suddenly, a structure rose from beneath the lunar surface. It was a repair station, dormant for millions of years, now active and ready to serve. Jake watched in amazement as beams of light scanned the Defiant from the station. Then mechanical arms, far more advanced than anything human-made, began repairing the damage to his ship. Hull breaches sealed, damaged systems restored. But more than that, the station was upgrading them, integrating new technology into human ships. "Captain, our weapon systems are changing," his tactical officer reported, excitement clear in her voice. "The station is installing new equipment. Power readings are incredible. We're getting weapons that might actually hurt those Velcron shields." Jake couldn't explain it, but he felt hope for the first time since the invasion began. Somehow, humanity had allies. Ancient allies that he didn't understand, but allies nonetheless. On Earth, Lisa Harper's resistance cell in Chicago was about to have their first encounter with a Guardian. They were hiding in an abandoned warehouse when the ground began to shake. At first, Lisa thought it was another Velcron bombing run. Then the wall of the warehouse exploded outward, not from weapons but from something pushing through from underground. A massive crystalline being rose from the earth. It stood 30 feet tall, roughly humanoid in shape but clearly not organic. Its body was made of a material that looked like colored glass but was harder than diamond. Light moved through it in patterns that seemed almost like thoughts. The Guardian's eyes, or what passed for eyes, glowed with gentle blue light. Lisa's fighters raised their weapons in panic, but the Guardian made no hostile moves toward them. Instead, it turned and walked toward where Velcron soldiers were stationed 3 blocks away. Its movements were smooth and purposeful, almost graceful despite its size. "Follow it," Lisa ordered, curiosity overcoming caution. They watched from cover as the Guardian encountered a Velcron patrol. The aliens immediately opened fire, their powerful weapons hitting the Guardian's crystalline body. But the beams simply absorbed into the crystal, making it glow brighter. Then the Guardian raised one arm and a pulse of energy shot out, precise and devastating. The Velcron soldiers and their armored vehicle simply disintegrated, leaving no trace. "Did you see that?" One of Lisa's fighters whispered in awe. "It didn't even struggle, it just deleted them." More Guardians began emerging around the world. From the Pacific Ocean near Japan, a Guardian rose from the depths, water streaming off its crystalline form as it walked ashore. Another emerged from beneath the Sahara Desert in Africa. More appeared in the Andes Mountains, in the forests of Russia, in the depths of the Mariana Trench. Dozens of them, all ancient, all powerful, all programmed to protect humanity from extinction. The Velcron forces were confused at first, then alarmed. These new combatants weren't human. They were something else entirely, something with technology that matched or exceeded Velcron capabilities. Warlord Craven demanded reports, growing, angry as his commanders described impossible creatures that couldn't be killed and weapons that bypassed their shields. General Marcus Blake and Admiral Kelly Watson, operating from a hidden military bunker, began receiving reports of the Guardians. At first, they thought it was misinformation or human desperation creating myths. Then they saw the video footage. Guardians walking through Velcron positions, systematically eliminating alien forces while carefully avoiding human casualties. The precision was incredible. Buildings stayed standing, civilians stayed safe, but Velcron soldiers simply ceased to exist. "What are they?" Marcus asked, watching a Guardian in Los Angeles dismantle an entire Velcron company. Unknown, sir, his intelligence officer replied. But they're on our side. That's all that matters right now. Nathan Cross worked frantically to decode more of the architect records. The Guardians were communicating using harmonic frequencies, complex patterns of sound and energy that carried information. With Amy's help, he began to understand how to communicate back. The Guardians weren't just mindless weapons. They were intelligent, capable of coordination and strategy. Jake Morrison's fleet, now repaired and upgraded with architect technology, prepared to leave the moon and rejoin the fight. His ships bristled with new weapons, their shields reinforced with technology that made human engineering look primitive. But Jake understood they weren't fighting alone anymore. Somehow, across millions of years, another species had reached forward to help humanity in its darkest hour. On Earth, the Guardians continued their work. They targeted only Velcron forces, never harming humans even when caught in crossfire. They moved through occupied cities like angels of protection, their crystalline forms reflecting the light of burning buildings. The tide of war was beginning to turn, and Warlord Craven could feel his grip on Earth starting to slip. The Guardian stood in what remained of downtown Chicago, its crystalline body reflecting the morning sun in 1,000 colors. Lisa Harper watched from a nearby building as it carefully moved through rubble, its massive hands gently pushing aside debris to free trapped civilians. When it found survivors, it would pause and send out a pulse of soft light that humans could follow to safety. Then it would continue its patrol, searching for Velcron soldiers. Lisa had spent 3 days observing the Guardians, learning their patterns. They never slept, never stopped. They seemed to understand that they were protectors, not conquerors. When Velcron forces attacked them, the Guardians responded with overwhelming force. But when humans approached, even armed ones, the Guardians simply observed and waited. "They're on our side," Lisa said to her team. "I don't know why and I don't know where they came from, but they're here to help us." At the Pentagon bunker, General Marcus Blake had reached the same conclusion. Nathan Cross and Amy Rivers had been brought in to brief military leadership on what they'd discovered in Antarctica. The holographic records played on screens throughout the war room, showing the architects and their ancient gift to humanity. So these Guardians were left here millions of years ago? Marcus asked, trying to wrap his mind around the concept. By aliens who decided humans were worth saving? Not exactly humans, Nathan explained. Our ancestors. The architects saw potential in early primates on Earth. They couldn't interfere directly with our evolution, but they could leave protection for us. Think of it as insurance. If we ever faced extinction from outside forces, the Guardians would activate. Admiral Kelly Watson studied the tactical displays showing Guardian positions around the world. "How many are there?" "We've identified 47 so far," Amy replied. "But there could be more. The architect records aren't complete. Can we communicate with them?" Marcus asked. Nathan nodded. "They use harmonic frequencies to share information. We've built a translation device, but it's basic. The Guardians seem to understand our situation without much explanation. They know the Velcron are the threat." Marcus stood and straightened his uniform. "Then it's time we coordinated our efforts. Patch me through to all remaining military units, resistance cells, and anyone else still fighting. We're going to take back our planet." The coordination between humanity and the Guardians wasn't perfect at first, but it improved rapidly. The Guardians shared tactical data through their harmonic communications, which Nathan's team translated into usable intelligence. They revealed weaknesses in Velcron fleet formations, vulnerable points in their armor, and patterns in their patrol routes. Information that would have taken months of intelligence gathering came in hours. Jake Morrison received the data while preparing his fleet for a renewed assault. The Lunar Architect Station had upgraded 20 human ships, giving them weapons and shields that could match Velcron technology. Jake studied the tactical information with his officers, planning their attack. "The Guardians are going to hit ground forces across the planet simultaneously," Jake explained. "When the Velcron fleet moves to support their troops, we hit them from orbit. The station provided us with weapons that can penetrate their shields. We finally have a fighting chance." The day of the coordinated attack arrived. On Earth, Guardians in every occupied city began their assault at precisely the same moment. They moved with terrifying efficiency, their crystalline forms glowing brighter as they absorbed Velcron weapons fire and redirected the energy into devastating counterattacks. In New York, 3 Guardians walked through Warlord Craven's defensive perimeter as if it didn't exist, destroying tanks and aircraft with pulses of focused energy. Lisa Harper and her resistance fighters followed behind a Guardian in Chicago, moving into areas that had been impossible to reach before. The Guardian cleared the path, and Lisa's team rescued civilians and secured buildings. It was the first time since the invasion that humans felt like they were winning. In orbit, Jake Morrison's fleet emerged from behind the moon and accelerated toward Earth. The Velcron fleet was in disarray, ships breaking formation to provide air support for their besieged ground forces. It was exactly the opening Jake needed. All ships target the command vessels, Jake ordered. Let's show them what architect technology can do. The Defiant fired its new weapons, beams of pure energy that the lunar station had installed. The Velcron shields flickered and failed under the assault. For the first time in the war, human weapons were destroying Velcron ships. Jake felt grim satisfaction as enemy vessels exploded, their crews meeting the same fate they'd inflicted on countless human ships. The space battle became fierce and chaotic. Velcron ships adapted quickly, trying new tactics to counter the architect weapons. But Jake's fleet had something the Velcron didn't: real-time tactical data from the Guardians. Every time the Velcron moved, the Guardians predicted it and shared that information. It was like fighting with eyes in the back of your head. On Earth, General Marcus Blake coordinated the largest military operation since the invasion. Every remaining unit, every resistance cell, every armed civilian group launched simultaneous attacks on Velcron positions. The Guardians provided cover, absorbing the worst of the enemy firepower while human forces pressed forward. In New York, Guardians reached Warlord Craven's headquarters. The Velcron commander watched in fury as his elite guards were swept aside by crystalline giants that couldn't be stopped. He ordered his personal shuttle prepared for evacuation, rage and disbelief warring in his mind. The Velcron Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had never faced defeat. Earth was supposed to be an easy victory. But something was wrong. These Guardians weren't natural evolution. They were too advanced, too purposeful. Someone had left them here specifically to protect humans. Craven didn't understand it, but he knew one thing: Earth was no longer a safe conquest. As Craven's shuttle lifted off from the roof of his headquarters, a Guardian reached the building. It looked up at the escaping craft and raised one crystalline arm. A beam of energy lanced out, precise and controlled. It didn't destroy Craven's shuttle, but disabled its engines, sending it crashing into the Hudson River. The Velcron warlord survived, but his dignity and his conquest were finished. The largest Guardian of all emerged from beneath Mount Everest. It was twice the size of the others, its crystalline form more complex and intricate. Nathan Cross realized this must be the Prime Guardian, the leader or coordinator of all the others. It stood on the mountain peak and sent out a harmonic pulse so powerful that every Guardian on the planet received it instantly. Then something incredible happened. Energy barriers, invisible until that moment, formed around Earth's major cities. The Guardians were generating shields protecting humanity's population centers. The Prime Guardian was taking no chances with what remained of the Velcron fleet. Warlord Craven's second-in-command, watching from the flagship Dreadclaw, saw the shields and knew the battle was lost. But Velcron pride wouldn't allow retreat without a final strike. He activated the planet killer weapon, a massive orbital cannon built into the bottom of the Dreadclaw. It was designed to crack a planet's crust, causing volcanic eruptions and earthquakes that would destroy all life. The weapon charged, gathering energy from the ship's reactors. Human sensors detected it, and panic spread through Earth's command centers. Even with the Guardians and their shields, a planet-killer weapon could end everything. Jake Morrison saw the Dreadclaw's weapon charging and knew his fleet couldn't stop it in time. The cannon was too heavily armored, and they were too far away. He opened communications to all ships. "This is Captain Morrison. It's been an honor serving with you all. We're going to ram that weapon. Maybe we can disrupt it enough to save Earth." But before Jake could give the order to accelerate, the Prime Guardian moved. From its position on Mount Everest, it generated a shield not around a city, but around the entire planet. The energy required was staggering, visible from space as a shimmering dome of light. When the Dreadclaw's planet killer fired, the blast hit the shield and dispersed harmlessly into space. The Prime Guardian stood firm, maintaining the shield, its crystalline body glowing so brightly it looked like a star on Earth's surface. The Velcron weapon fired again and again, but each shot failed. Finally, the Dreadclaw's energy reserves depleted, and the weapon went silent. Jake Morrison saw his opportunity. All ships focus fire on the Dreadclaw. Now, while their power is down, the human fleet and the remaining Guardians in orbit concentrated their attack on the Velcron flagship. Its shields were weak from powering the planet killer, and architect weapons tore through the remaining defenses. The Dreadclaw tried to retreat, but it was too late. Explosions rippled across its hull as human vengeance found its mark. The final battle for Earth came swiftly and decisively. Jake Morrison's fleet, reinforced with architect technology and fighting alongside the remaining Guardians, launched a coordinated assault on the crippled Dreadclaw and the last Velcron vessels defending it. The space around Earth lit up with weapons fire, but this time humanity wasn't on the losing side. Jake stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching tactical displays as human ships executed perfect attack runs. The weeks of fighting had transformed Earth's military into a hardened, effective force. They'd learned from every battle, adapted to every challenge. Now, equipped with technology that could match the Velcron, they were unstoppable. Dreadclaw's shields are failing, the tactical officer reported. Multiple hull breaches. They're trying to retreat. Don't let them, Jake ordered. Target their engines. I want that flagship disabled, not destroyed. We need prisoners and intelligence. The Defiant's upgraded weapons fired, precise beams that cut through the Dreadclaw's engines. The massive ship went dead in space, powerless and defeated. Around it, the last Velcron vessels scattered, fleeing Earth's system and broadcasting warnings to their empire. The messages all said the same thing. Earth was defended by ancient technology beyond Velcron capability. Avoid at all costs. On Earth's surface, Lisa Harper stood in what remained of downtown Chicago, watching the news broadcast of the space battle on a screen someone had rigged up to emergency power. When the Dreadclaw went dark and the announcer declared victory, the entire street erupted in cheers. People who had been hiding, fighting, and surviving for weeks finally allowed themselves to celebrate. But Lisa couldn't fully join in. She looked around at the destroyed buildings, the makeshift graves of those who hadn't made it, the children whose eyes had seen too much horror. They had won, yes, but the cost was written across every face and every ruined block. "We'll rebuild," said an older man standing next to her, following her gaze. "Humans always do." Lisa nodded. "Yeah, we will." In Geneva, world leaders gathered for an emergency session. The war was over, but the aftermath was just beginning. Billions of people displaced, entire cities destroyed, economies shattered. And now, the knowledge that humanity wasn't alone in the universe and never had been. The truth about the architects and the Guardians had to be shared with everyone. General Marcus Blake addressed the assembly, his uniform still showing signs of weeks spent in command bunkers. "We survived because of technology left by a species that existed before humans even evolved. They saw something in our ancestors worth protecting. Now we have access to that technology, and we have decisions to make." Dr. Amy Rivers presented the complete findings from the architect sites. The installations across the solar system contained not just weapons and shields, but manufacturing facilities, energy systems, and knowledge databases. Everything humanity needed to rebuild and expand into space. But the architects had left clear warnings about responsibility and restraint. "The technology is ours to use," Amy explained, "but we have to prove ourselves worthy of it." The architects watched species destroy themselves with power they weren't ready for. They designed the Guardians to protect us from outside threats, not from ourselves. Admiral Kelly Watson took over, explaining the military situation. "The Velcron Empire knows about us now, and so will every other power in this region of the galaxy. The Prime Guardian's message made sure of that. Some will be curious, some will want to trade, some will see us as threats. We need a defense force that can operate across the solar system, maybe beyond." The decision was made to create the Solar Defense Initiative. Every nation contributed resources and personnel to build a unified defense force. The scattered military units that had fought the Velcron would become the core of something new, an organization dedicated to protecting Earth and eventually humanity's colonies in space. Nathan Cross led the effort to study and adapt architect technology for human use. Working from the Antarctic facility, his team learned how to integrate the ancient systems with human engineering. It wasn't simple. The technology was millions of years more advanced, but the architects had designed it to be learnable, with teaching systems that adapted to human minds. The lunar station that had repaired Jake Morrison's fleet became the first major human installation using architect technology. Engineers expanded it, building shipyards where vessels could be constructed that blended human innovation with ancient knowledge. The ships wouldn't be purely architect technology. They would be something new, something uniquely human but enhanced by the gifts left behind. Jake Morrison was promoted to admiral and given command of the new fleet being built. The Defiant would remain his flagship, a symbol of humanity's survival and determination. He stood in the expanded lunar station 6 months after the war's end, watching construction crews assemble the first true human architect hybrid warship. They were naming it the Guardian, in honor of the protectors who had sacrificed themselves. "What do you think?" Admiral Kelly Watson asked, joining Jake at the observation window. "I think we're starting to figure out who we are," Jake replied. "Not just Earth's defenders anymore, something bigger." On Earth, reconstruction proceeded at a pace that surprised even the optimists. Architect technology provided clean, nearly unlimited energy. Manufacturing systems could produce materials and components far faster than traditional methods. Cities rose from their ruins, redesigned with the painful lessons of the invasion in mind. This time they built with defense in mind, with shelters and shield generators integrated into the infrastructure. Lisa Harper didn't return to civilian life, not exactly. She took a position training the next generation of soldiers, teaching the harsh lessons learned during the resistance. Her students were young people who had lived through the invasion, who understood that the universe was dangerous and Earth needed protectors. She was tough on them but fair, knowing that their training might someday save millions of lives. The Guardians themselves became a subject of endless fascination and reverence. The 17 cores of fallen Guardians were placed in a memorial built in Geneva, a massive structure of glass and steel that honored their sacrifice. People came from around the world to stand before the cores, which still pulsed with faint light. Some people prayed, some just stood in silence. Everyone felt the weight of what those ancient protectors had done. The Prime Guardian remained on Mount Everest, dormant but monitoring. Nathan had learned enough of the harmonic language to receive basic communications from it. The massive crystalline being was satisfied. Humanity had proven itself capable of surviving and learning. The Guardians could rest, knowing their creator's gift had not been wasted. But the Prime Guardian's final message before going dormant was both encouraging and sobering. The architects had left protection, but the responsibility for humanity's future rested with humans themselves. The Guardians would wake for extinction threats, but everything else, war, famine, climate, politics, growth, that was humanity's challenge to face. "We're on our own," Nathan explained to a gathering of scientists and leaders. "The Guardians gave us a chance, but we have to make something of it. We can't rely on ancient technology to solve our problems." A year after the invasion, Earth had transformed. The Solar Defense Initiative operated a fleet of 30 ships patrolling the solar system. Colonies were being established on Mars and several moons, using architect technology to make them self-sufficient. Trade negotiations had begun with 2 alien species that approached peacefully, curious about the humans who had defeated the Velcron. General Marcus Blake, now retired from active military service, became the director of a new institution dedicated to studying Earth's place in the galactic community. He worked with Nathan and Amy to prepare humanity for the reality that they were just one species among thousands in a galaxy full of wonders and dangers. Jake Morrison's fleet conducted its first deep space patrol, venturing beyond the solar system to scout nearby star systems. They found ancient architect markers on 3 worlds, suggesting that Earth wasn't the only place the ancient species had visited. One planet showed signs of a civilization that had destroyed itself long ago, a grim reminder of the warnings in the architect records. Lisa Harper trained her 100th class of recruits, young men and women who would serve in the Solar Defense Initiative. On their graduation day, she brought them to the memorial in Geneva, making them stand before the Guardian Corps. These beings died protecting us, she told them. They weren't human, weren't even from our time, but they gave everything to make sure we survived. Now it's our turn. We protect humanity. We make sure their sacrifice meant something. The young soldiers stood at attention, understanding the weight of the responsibility they were accepting. 5 years after the invasion, a child in New Delhi asked her mother about the glowing crystal in the city's central memorial. It was a fragment from a fallen guardian, one of thousands displayed in cities around the world. "Why did they protect us?" the child asked. Her mother smiled. "Because someone a long time ago thought we were worth saving. They saw something special in humans even when we were just learning to walk upright. They left guardians to watch over us until we were strong enough to watch over ourselves."